over at the Department of War and the Pentagon press corps staged this walkout, refusing to take part in the new standards and new rules for accreditation over at the Pentagon. And they said, oh, well, you're not going to be credentialed if we have to follow rules and do these things. And they were marching out with their boxes and their binders. And, you know, they were going up on TV saying how they were the real victims and all of this nonsense. Well, the way I look at it is, gosh, what an opportunity to replace them. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to announce that Human Events is now a partner of the new Pentagon press corps, as well as the post-millennial. And here to explain exactly what that means and what that entails and what's all going to happen, we have Kingsley Wilson from the Department of War here to discuss it. Kingsley, thanks for coming back.
Great to join you, Jack.
Well, I just have to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be involved in the Pentagon press corps. Of course, as a prior Navy officer myself, I never expected to be involved in the department in such a way, but here we are.
It's fantastic news, and we're so proud to have Human Events and over 60 other journalists that are going to be joining us here in the Pentagon. And you talked a little bit about the previous Pentagon press corps. They walked out because they refused to sign an agreement that was simple. It was common sense. It said, wear a visible press badge, don't go in classified spaces, stay in the correspondence corridor, and follow the building's rules. They refused to do that. They self-deported. That was their right, but also their loss, because now we get to have incredible journalists like yourself who are going to be here in the Pentagon reporting on what the Department of War is doing every single day. It's really the next generation of journalism at the Pentagon, and we're so excited for this new era and this new generation. I think we saw President Trump use this on the campaign trail so well, right? He didn't have to rely on the mainstream media's corrupt filter to get his message out. He went to independent journalists, he went on podcasts and alternative news networks where he was able to speak directly to the American people. That's exactly what we hope to do here at the Department of War, and we're really excited to welcome this new group of 60 plus journalists. It's awesome.
Well, and I have to say, by the way, just honored to have been included at the Navy's 250th birthday and tagging along sort of in the new media seat as well with the USS Bush and that display of naval firepower, the same firepower that the cartels are now getting a taste of down in the Mar Caribe when they're trying to infiltrate the United States and trying to cross get their illicit substances into our area. And, you know, I was not to digress, but, you know, I was on the Piers Morgan show yesterday and people were saying, oh, you know, how can the U.S. do this? And I said, well, wait a minute. The United States Navy and the Coast Guard have been interdicting small boats and interdicting gun runners and slavers and pirates and mercenaries and all rum runners during Prohibition and all the rest for actually hundreds of years in the Caribbean. This is nothing new. And so it's unbelievable to me that the press corps is just so deficient, or I should say the previous press corps was so deficient in understanding just basic history. Guys, it's worth a grok to understand that this is actually a mission that the United States military, in particular one, the United States Navy, one that I'm proud of to have been served in, has been doing for hundreds of years. And, you know, I served at Guantanamo Bay right there in Southern Command to U.S. Southcom. And that had prior to detention operations, had been a key base as a recoaling station and refueling station in these types of operations. This is nothing new. But again, just, to point to something that's going on right now that clearly shows that the people covering the Pentagon, people covering the Department of War, have no idea what they're talking about.
Absolutely. And that's why we're so excited to have folks like yourself, Jack, who were Navy intel officers, who understand this stuff, have that important perspective, and are going to be able to tell the American people the ground truth of what's going on without the leftist ideology, without the mainstream media spin. The American people are now going to get the cold hard facts. And the cold hard facts are that what we are doing in the Southcom AOR all across the Western Hemisphere is protecting the homeland and keeping the American people safe. That is something that President Trump campaigned on doing. It's something that Secretary Hegseth is incredibly focused on, and we will continue to ensure that people are not trafficking deadly narcotics into our borders, across our shores. It's totally unacceptable. If we have that kind of activity in the Gulf of America or elsewhere, we don't have a country. We don't have a homeland that is secure and protected. And we need to make sure, as a Department of War, that we are keeping the American people safe. So these operations will continue. We had our 8th strike yesterday, our first that was in the Eastern Pacific. And we will continue to seek out these narco-terrorists wherever they are and make sure that we dismantle these narco-terrorist networks. They can't be allowed to, wreak havoc on the American people anymore. President Trump has said no, so this has got to stop.
And by the way, Press Secretary Wilson, that I had this. I was on the Piers Morgan show yesterday, so it's back and forth, and you're changing subjects rapidly. But I didn't get a chance to say this, and something I wanted to point out. And then people had said, "Well, why do the strikes instead of a VBSS, Visit Board Search and Siege operation, like you may see?" And the president got to see a sort of demonstration of that, an evolution that was conducted off of the USS Bush, where they had sent a Navy SEAL team to conduct a VBSS on a destroyer, a simulation of what it might look like at sea. But the response that I had is, do they understand how dangerous that is for our sailors, for our servicemen? Do they understand the harm that you are asking them to put themselves in if they're going to try to, board a semi-submersible that's being run by drug runners, to board one of these things that's being run by cartel members? And so, yes, of course, as a prior intel officer, of course, we're always looking for more information, more intelligence, sources of information. And so, we understand that obviously with the strikes, you don't always get all of that information out. But absolutely, one of the biggest risks that you're talking about is conducting one of these VBSS operations. And, again, it's just goes to show you that I really think that there's a lot of people covering the Pentagon, covering the Department of War, that are very glib. They've been very glib about this, and they pick a narrative and they run with it, rather than actually talking to people who served, who have a basic understanding of how these operations work and what they mean for the servicemen. And that's obviously been something that the new Secretary of War has put first and foremost in his duty.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think these strikes also that the president has directed send a message, right? They tell cartels across the region, think twice before you try to harm American citizens with your deadly narcotics and deadly drugs. That is an important message that we're sending. We've spent years as a military, nation building, doing UN missions all across the world, while we have ignored what has been happening in our very own hemisphere and at our very own border. That has ended thanks to President Trump and Secretary Hegseth's vision and leadership. So many of these cartel drug networks have been totally dismantled, and we will continue to ensure that they are fully dismantled, because that's what the American people deserve. And it has been disgraceful to see so many in the media carry water for a lot of these narco terrorists. You have people claiming that they're fishermen. Jack, you and I both know that if you have a semi-submersible submarine, you're probably not a fisherman.